What would you wear if your wealth had to travel with you throughout the storms and long winters? A single ring could buy a boat, seal a marriage, or swear loyalty to a lord. Every piece of jewelry meant identity and power you could hold in your hand. So today, we're cracking open hoards and graves to see how Viking jewelry actually worked. Essentially money you could melt with messages you could read at a glance, and gifts that bound rivals into allies. Most people picture Vikings with ships and axes. If you met one in a busy market, the first thing you'd notice might be the shine. Jewelry was everywhere. Brooches pinned whole outfits together. Arm rings flashed like wallets. Beads added color and meaning. Viking jewelry wasn't just decoration, it was identity, money, and sometimes a promise. Walk into a trading town and look around. You would see silver glint on wrists and chests. You would hear the click of bead strings when people moved. In a world without business cards, jewelry did the talking. It told you who had reach, who had rank, and who could pay on the spot. Archaeologists see the same story in the ground. Hoards mix coins, chopped silver, arm rings, and pendants in a single stash. That mix shows how jewelry and currency lived side by side. Materials spoke first. Gold signaled elite status. Silver meant success and trust. Bronze, brass, and iron were practical and common. Amber came from Baltic shores. Carnelian and rock crystal traveled far. Glass beads were proof of skilled hands and busy markets. A person who wore all of that at once announced networks and power without a word. Clothes demanded hardware. In many Scandinavian regions, a woman's strap dress hung from two large oval brooches. People call them tortoise brooches because of their domed shape. They sat high on the chest and took real strain. Some were plain, others were covered in fine patterns, gilding, and tiny foils that made them glow. Those paired brooches were not only pretty, they were the working hinges of the outfit. A third long brooch could close an outer layer down the front. The dress became a frame for beads that hung between the two ovals like a bright bridge. Men used brooches too. A single disc or ring brooch could fix a cloak at the shoulder. Pins and clips held tunics and hoods. Finger rings and pendants added extra signals. Keys on a ring could hang from a woman's belt to show household authority. Small tools and amulets rode at the waist. Nothing was random. Every piece had a job in daily life and a meaning in public life. Beads acted like a quiet biography. A simple string of blue glass might be local. A layered mix of amber, glass, jet, and carnelian shouted travel and trade. Beads fall through floorboards, spill from bags, and roll into corners. That is why they show up in house debris as well as graves. In ship burials and rich graves, you see strings that took years to build. A child might lie with a few bright beads for comfort. An adult could carry a heavy set that marked age, status, and connections. You can follow routes by following the colors. Symbols sat next to the heart. Thor's hammers hang from many chains. Crosses do too. People wore what they believed, and belief could change across a lifetime. In some regions, you find both types in the same graveyard. That shows conversion as a slow process and a personal one. A hammer might mean luck, loyalty, or family memory. A cross might mark new faith, trade ties, or hope. Small animal pendants also had meaning. A bird, a horse, or a boar could be a wish for protection or skill. Thick arm rings were more than flair. They were portable cash. You could pay by weight, cut a strip, weigh it on a small scale, and settle a deal. That is why we find rings and ingots with clean-cut marks. Scales and hand weights turn up in market layers and in graves of people who did business. Banks were rare. Trust rested on silver and on the hand that held it out. Let's step into a workshop. The room is warm from a charcoal fire. The craftsperson works at a low bench covered in tools. There are stone and clay molds for casting. A wax model sits in a little dish. When the mold hardens and the wax melts out, molten metal can flow in. That is the lost wax method for complex shapes. For simpler pieces, metal is poured into open molds and then filed smooth. Sheet metal is hammered into bowls and discs. Thin wire becomes filigree. Tiny beads of metal are fused to surfaces in a technique called granulation. Stamped foils add shimmer under openwork. Bronze can be gilded to mimic gold. A mid-rank brooch can look royal once the gold leaf goes on. The bench tells the story with offcuts, miscasts, and dies worn smooth by use. Archaeology lets us watch this work at scale. In trading towns like Birka, Dublin, and York, layers of waste show cycles of fashion. In one layer, you find tight knotwork and gripping beasts. In the next, animals stretch into ribbons. Plant forms creep in. Later, they grow into long curves and elegant twists. These names, Bore, Jellinge, Mammen, Ringerike, Urnes, are style families. Once you learn their look, you can place a piece in time, and sometimes in place. A trefoil brooch points to contacts with the Frankish world. A big disc brooch with punched borders feels Western Norwegian. Style rode the same boats as furs, iron, and grain. Men's and women's kits overlapped but were not identical. Many women wore the paired ovals with bead strings and sometimes a third brooch. Men leaned on cloak brooches, arm rings, finger rings, and pendants. Both used practical pins. Children wore smaller versions of adult items. A small cross on a child speaks about the household as much as about the child. A tiny hammer on a string could be a charm more than a statement. We should be careful not to lock people into boxes. Regions varied, and lives were messy. The finds let us see patterns without forcing rules. Law codes, poems, and sagas add context. Bride wealth and dowry sometimes included jewelry. Gifts bound people to leaders. Skaldic poems praise ring givers, which is another way to say a leader who rewards. A ring handed over in a hall is not only a payment, it is a public tie. You owe something back. The metal holds the memory of the moment. Politics and silver move together. Rulers and traders used jewelry to show reach. A leader who wore heavy gold and fine work said he could summon wealth by trade, tribute, or force. That same leader handed out rings to keep warriors loyal. Traders wore good pieces to attract trust and to show that they could pay. Families used jewelry to mark marriages and births. People carried pieces to the grave as a last message. Across Scandinavia and the wider Viking world, graves hold brooches, beads, rings, and pendants. A burial kit is a final sentence. This is who I was, who I loved, and what I believed. Trade routes run through the metal. Open a hoard and you meet the wider world. Silver dirhams from the Islamic world sit with Anglo-Saxon pennies and Carolingian coins. Some are pierced and worn as pendants. Others are chopped to spend as bullion. Baltic amber sits with glass that hints at continental workshops. A string with carnelian points to roots that reached east. Map the finds and you get lines from the North Atlantic down rivers toward the Black and Caspian Seas. Jewelry turns those lines into something you can hold in your hand. Markets made and remade taste. Craftspeople set up near docks and streets. They took custom orders and repairs. A cloak pin breaks and returns as a pendant. A miscast brooch goes back into the crucible. A die that made last year's border sits next to a new one with a fresh pattern. Fashion is not a modern idea. It is a cycle of small changes that people adopt and adapt. Not everyone glowed like a chieftain. Many people wore simple bronze pins, plain rings, and a string of glass beads. Some pendants were made by recycling scrap. An old nail hammered flat. A broken blade reshaped and drilled. A cheap charm can still carry weight. A small hammer for luck. A cheap cross for hope. A bead for beauty. Even at the bottom of the ladder, people chose to mark themselves with meaning. These pieces needed care. Pins bend, clasps fail, rings crack. We find spare hooks and rivets on house floors. We see wire loops added to keep a favorite brooch in service. We also need to remember what does not survive. Leather thongs and thread rot away. Wood and cloth vanish in most soils. What we dig up is the hard shell. The soft parts that tied the system together are gone. That is a bias in the record that we must respect when we tell the story. Faith changed, and jewelry adapted. As Christianity spread in the Viking world, more crosses appear. Hammers remain for a while. In some places, you see both in the same layer. Households held mixed beliefs across generations. Over time, crosses win the numbers, but the habit of wearing faith next to the skin does not fade. The form shifts, the function stays. If you want to see this story in person, plan a small museum raid. In London, you can stand in front of hoards that mix chopped silver, coins, and jewelry. In Copenhagen, you can see a gold set that blends hammer and cross in a single elite collection. In Oslo, the ship burials show how power dressed for the afterlife. Each display case is a chapter you can read with your eyes. Let's bring it down to one person. Picture a woman in a busy market town. She wears a strap dress held by two oval brooches. Between them hangs a string of beads, amber from the Baltic, a few blue glass beads from a local stall, and two carnelian beads that traveled far. A small hammer hangs from the left brooch, a small cross from the right. At her belt are keys that ring when she walks. Each piece says something clear. She runs a household. She is tied into trade. Her faith is layered. She is not a stereotype. She is someone you could meet. Now picture a craftsman at a riverside table. He wears a thick silver arm ring with cut marks along the back. He carries small scales in a leather pouch. A disc brooch holds his cloak. A pierced coin hangs from his neck on a leather thong. He files the edge of a brooch while talking to a farmer about a repair. He buys a broken ring by weight and sells a new pin for a fair price. His tools are neat. His hands are black at the nails. He is a working link in a chain that connects farms, ships, and halls. We can even hear jewelry in the language of law and custom. Bride gifts include brooches and rings. Oaths are sworn with a hand on sacred objects. A lord who fails to reward loses followers. A traitor who cheats on weight loses face. Jewelry carries trust. It can burn trust too. That is why scales and standards matter. That is why some hoards look like a ledger. They hold the profits of deals and the fear of loss. We should clear a few myths. Horned helmets belong to theater props, not to graves. Real helmets are rare and plain. The real Viking bling sits on chests and wrists, not on horns. Another myth says only men wore showy pieces. Many of the most complex works are from women's graves. Those big oval brooches and layered bead strings are feats of design and craft. Women's jewelry is one of the best sources we have for taste, status, and regional identity. Jewelry also crossed faith lines without always causing a fight. A hammer and a cross can live in the same household. A father may hold to old gods while a daughter wears a cross. A traveler may wear both for safety on different roads. The ground does not give us speeches, it gives us objects. Those objects say that belief was a path, not a single step. Everything we have said rests on finds, not guesswork. Hoards show mixtures of coin, ingot, and ornament. Graves show dress in place. Workshop waste shows craft in motion. Style groups show time passing. We need to remember that absence in one region does not mean a custom never happens. Soil, luck, and later building can erase as much as they preserve. Even so, the pattern is strong. Jewelry sits at the center of Viking life. So what did Vikings wear, and why does it matter? They wore brooches that held clothes and carried style. They wore beads that tracked trade and taste. They wore arm rings that could pay a debt. They wore symbols that guarded the heart. It matters because these pieces turn the Viking world from a cartoon into a community. A brooch is a hinge and a statement. A ring is cash and a promise. A bead is color and a root. When you learn to read them, you can walk through any case of artifacts and hear voices. Thanks for staying with me through the metal and the mud of the past. If this helped Viking jewelry click into place, that's a win. See you next time.